One interview that stunned millions and changed everything.
The moment looks harmless at first. Two of the most powerful figures in American entertainment smiling under studio lights. But within minutes, live television would capture something neither side could fully control. Subscribe to American Narrative, hit like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. This wasn't a scandal breaking in real time. There were no leaked documents, no ambush accusations, no hostile crowd. What made this moment unforgettable was precisely the opposite. It unfolded calmly, politely, even warmly, until one simple line of questioning shifted the energy in the room. On live television, with no edits, no reset, no second take. When Tom Cruise sat down with Oprah Winfrey in 2005, the expectation was clear. This was supposed to be celebration television. Cruise was one of the most bankable movie stars on the planet, fresh off a wave of blockbuster success, and Oprah was the most trusted interviewer in America, known for empathy, not confrontation. Their relationship wasn't adversarial. They had history, mutual respect, comfort. And that's exactly why what happened next mattered. Because when a host you trust presses just a little harder, when the smile stays, but the question sharpens, the result can be more revealing than any hostile interrogation. Especially when millions are watching live. This interview aired at a pivotal moment in Tom Cruise's career. For over 2 decades, he had carefully cultivated an image that bordered on untouchable. Disciplined, charismatic, intensely private. His public persona was built on control of his roles, his stunts, his press appearances. Even his off-screen life was managed with precision. Interviews were friendly. Boundaries were respected. The narrative rarely slipped out of his hands. Oprah's show, meanwhile, was the safest place a celebrity could land. The couch wasn't just furniture, it was symbolic. People cried there, confessed there, healed there. Oprah didn't trap guests. She invited them to open up. Viewers trusted her because she asked the questions they wanted answered, without seeming cruel or opportunistic. So when Cruise arrived on that stage, the atmosphere felt light. The audience applauded. Oprah beamed. The conversation began exactly as expected. Movies, success, gratitude. Nothing controversial. Nothing sharp. It felt like another polished chapter in a long-running success story. But live television has a way of magnifying tiny shifts. A pause that lingers half a second too long. A smile that tightens just slightly. A question that sounds casual, but isn't. Cruise was there to promote a film, but the public conversation around him had already begun to change. His personal life, usually guarded, was suddenly visible in a way it hadn't been before. The media coverage was relentless. Fans were curious. Critics were skeptical. And even supporters sensed something different in his public demeanor. Oprah didn't arrive at that interview unaware of any of this. She was a master at reading the room and the moment. Her questions were never random. They were calibrated, carefully worded, designed to feel safe while gently nudging toward truth. What makes this interview so enduring isn't that Oprah attacked Tom Cruise. She didn't. There was no shouting, no raised voices, no accusation. Instead, she did something far more powerful on live TV. She followed up. She didn't let an answer pass without clarity. She didn't move on when the response felt rehearsed. She leaned in, not aggressively, but insistently. And in doing so, she created a moment where control began to slip. For Cruise, that loss of control was visible. Not dramatic, not explosive, but unmistakable. The audience felt it before they understood it. Laughter became uneven. Applause came late. The rhythm of the conversation changed. Oprah remained composed, but her role subtly shifted, from celebratory host to careful moderator of something unpredictable. And this was happening live. No commercial break to recalibrate. No producer whispering in an earpiece. No chance to reframe the narrative afterward. In the years since, the clip has been replayed, analyzed, slowed down, and dissected. Not because of what was said alone, but because of what was revealed. About celebrity power. About media trust. about what happens when a polished public image meets an unscripted moment. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about exposure, quiet, human, and unavoidable. A single interview that redefined how audiences saw Tom Cruise, how talk shows were perceived, and how quickly a safe space could turn into a crucible. And the most unsettling part. At the moment it happened, almost no one realized how significant it would become. Because the question that changed everything hadn't even been asked yet. In the weeks leading up to the interview, Tom Cruise was everywhere, and not in the usual, carefully polished way. For the first time in years, his private life had become front-page conversation, and the tone of that coverage was noticeably different. For decades, Cruise had mastered the art of distance. Audiences knew his smile, his intensity, his on-screen fearlessness, but very little about his inner world. He rarely stumbled in interviews. He answered questions efficiently, confidently, and moved on. Hollywood respected that discipline. So did the press. But by the mid-2000s, that balance was shifting. Cruise's romantic life had entered a new phase, one that played out publicly and enthusiastically. His relationship with actress Katie Holmes wasn't just acknowledged, it was celebrated loudly, repeatedly, and often unexpectedly. Talk shows, red carpets, and press junkets suddenly featured a version of Tom Cruise that felt unfamiliar even to longtime fans. At the same time, his outspoken advocacy for Scientology, something he had previously kept more restrained in mainstream interviews, was becoming more prominent. He was no longer sidestepping questions about his beliefs. He was addressing them directly, passionately, and sometimes confrontationally. The media took notice. Headlines shifted from admiration to curiosity, then to skepticism. Commentators began asking whether Cruise was changing, or whether this was simply a side of him the public had never seen before. Interviews that once felt routine now carried tension, because no one knew where the conversation might go. And Cruise seemed energized by it. He wasn't retreating. He was leaning in. That context mattered deeply when Oprah Winfrey booked him for her show. This wasn't just another celebrity appearance. Oprah's audience was massive, loyal, and emotionally invested. When someone spoke on her couch, people listened differently. They trusted the exchange to be honest, even when it was uncomfortable. Oprah herself had a reputation for preparation. She didn't rely on surprise tactics. She studied her guests, tracked public sentiment, and understood exactly what questions viewers wanted addressed. By the time Cruise arrived, she knew the audience wasn't just interested in his latest movie. They were watching him as a person. And Cruise knew that too. From the moment he walked onto the stage, his energy was unmistakable. He was animated, expressive, almost restless. He spoke quickly, laughed loudly. His body language filled the space. To some, it read as joy. To others, intensity. The studio audience responded enthusiastically, but not uniformly. Applause came in waves rather than as a steady current. People were engaged, but observant. Watching closely, Oprah matched his energy at first. She smiled. She affirmed. She let him speak. This was her trademark, allowing guests to reveal themselves without interruption. The conversation flowed easily, but beneath the surface, something else was building. Because Oprah wasn't avoiding the bigger questions. She began circling topics that had been dominating public conversation, carefully, gently, but unmistakably. Cruise answered confidently, often expansively. He wasn't defensive. If anything, he seemed eager to explain himself. That eagerness, however, created its own tension. As the interview progressed, Cruise began steering answers into broader territory. Belief systems, personal convictions, certainty. His tone shifted from conversational to declarative. He wasn't just sharing experiences. He was making statements. Oprah listened closely. She didn't interrupt. She nodded. But she also didn't let certain claims pass unexamined. This was subtle, but crucial. Oprah's skill wasn't confrontation. It was clarification. When something sounded absolute, she asked for context. When an answer felt final, she asked why. Her questions weren't accusatory, but they were persistent. And persistence can feel threatening to someone accustomed to control. Cruz had spent years managing interviews by setting the pace. If he spoke with confidence, most interviewers followed his lead. Few pushed back. Fewer still did so calmly, on live television, with an audience hanging on every word. The closer the conversation moved toward deeply personal beliefs, the more fragile the balance became. Cruz's expressions tightened slightly. His posture shifted forward. He spoke faster, sometimes cutting off his own sentences to redirect them. Oprah noticed. Viewers noticed too, even if subconsciously. This was no longer a promotional interview. It was becoming a test of boundaries. The studio atmosphere reflected that shift. Laughter became cautious. Applause felt polite rather than enthusiastic. The audience wasn't disengaged, they were focused, listening for what might happen next. Behind the scenes, producers could do nothing. This was live. No delay. No editing safety net. Oprah understood exactly where she was standing. She had built her career on trust. Trust with her audience and trust with her guests. But trust didn't mean silence. And when something felt unresolved, she addressed it. The question she was moving toward wasn't explosive on its face. It wasn't designed to shock. In fact, it was the kind of question millions of viewers ask privately when watching celebrities speak with certainty about complex issues. It was a question that required nuance. And nuance is dangerous territory when confidence hardens into absolutes. Cruz seemed unaware, or unconcerned, about the narrowing path ahead. He continued speaking with conviction, framing his views as clarity rather than opinion. From his perspective, he was explaining himself honestly. From Oprah's perspective, he was making claims that demanded examination. The difference between those two viewpoints is where the tension lived. As the conversation approached its critical moment, Oprah's tone didn't change, but her focus sharpened. She waited for an opening, a pause, a statement that invited follow-up. When it came, she didn't hesitate. The audience leaned in. Cruz smiled, still unaware that the interview was about to cross a line neither side could uncross. And in that instant, just before the words left her mouth, the balance of power shifted. Because the next question wouldn't just shape the rest of the interview. It would define how this moment would be remembered. The shift happens quietly. There's no dramatic music cue. No audible gasp from the audience. Just a brief pause, barely noticeable unless you're paying close attention. Oprah sits back slightly, her expression calm, her voice measured. She doesn't raise it. She doesn't sharpen it. She simply asks the next question. It's direct, but not aggressive. Framed as curiosity, not accusation. A question many viewers had been carrying with them, waiting to hear addressed clearly, plainly, and in real time. And because this is live television, there's no buffer between the question and the reaction. Tom Cruise answers immediately at first. His tone is confident, assured. He speaks as someone who believes deeply in what he's saying. But as his response continues, something begins to change. His words accelerate. His hands move more sharply. His posture leans forward, not toward Oprah, but into the space between them. Oprah listens. She doesn't interrupt. She lets him finish. Then she follows up. It's not a counterargument. It's a clarification. She reframes part of his answer, repeating it back to him in simpler terms, the way she often does, making sure she understands correctly. That's when the rhythm breaks. Cruz pauses. Not long. Just long enough for the audience to feel it. His smile doesn't disappear, but it tightens. His eyes narrow slightly, not in anger, but in focus. This is no longer casual conversation. He responds again, this time with more emphasis. His voice rises just enough to register. He speaks in absolutes. He draws clear lines. There's certainty in every sentence. Oprah nods, but her expression changes. Not confrontational, concerned. She gently challenges the framing, asking whether there's room for differing experiences, for complexity. The studio grows noticeably quieter. Cruz shifts in his seat. He gestures with his hands, palms turning outward as if presenting a case. His speech becomes more rapid, more forceful. He's no longer explaining himself. He's defending a position. This is happening live. There's no cutaway. No audience reaction shot to soften the moment. The camera stays tight, alternating between Cruz's animated delivery and Oprah's steady, attentive gaze. She doesn't back down. She asks another question, shorter this time, more precise. It's not loaded. It's almost clinical. Cruz answers, but now there's an edge. He leans forward again, this time unmistakably. His tone sharpens. He corrects her phrasing. He asserts authority over the subject, framing his perspective as informed, definitive. Oprah responds with something rare for daytime television. Silence. She lets the moment breathe. She doesn't rush to fill it. She allows the weight of his words to hang in the air, trusting the audience to process what they've just heard. That silence does more than any interruption could. Cruz notices it. His body stills for a beat. He blinks. Then he continues speaking, as if to reclaim momentum. But the cadence is off. The ease from earlier in the interview is gone. The audience doesn't laugh. They don't applaud. They wait. Oprah finally speaks again, her voice calm but firm. She acknowledges his conviction, then asks whether certainty can sometimes limit understanding. It's a philosophical question, delivered gently. Cruz's reaction is immediate. He shakes his head. He speaks over the end of her sentence, not loudly, but decisively. He rejects the premise entirely. His certainty hardens. The words come faster now, overlapping slightly, as if urgency has replaced reflection. This is the moment many viewers would later point to. Not because of what was said, but because of how it unfolded. A global movie star, accustomed to deference, is being calmly challenged on live television by a host who refuses to retreat, but also refuses to attack. There's no villain here. Just two strong personalities navigating a narrowing space. Oprah maintains composure. She doesn't escalate. She doesn't debate. Instead, she redirects, trying to ground the conversation, to bring it back to shared understanding. But Cruz keeps pressing forward. His gestures grow broader. His expressions more intense. He speaks as if the stakes are high, because, for him, they are. This isn't about publicity anymore. It's about belief, identity, control. The camera captures everything. A slight furrow in Oprah's brow. A fleeting glance from Cruz toward the audience. A collective stillness in the room that feels almost physical. This is what live television does best, and worst. It reveals. There's no commercial break to reset the tone. No producer stepping in. The conversation has momentum, and it's carrying them somewhere neither can fully steer. Oprah tries once more to soften the exchange. She reframes his point in empathetic terms, acknowledging his passion. She asks if there's space for people to arrive at different conclusions. Cruz responds firmly. He repeats himself, nearly verbatim. His jaw sets. His eyes lock forward. The exchange doesn't explode. It doesn't collapse. It simply reaches a point of visible tension that can't be ignored. For a brief moment, both fall silent. The audience waits. Oprah nods slowly, then transitions the conversation, not because the topic is resolved, but because it has reached its limit. She thanks him for sharing his perspective. Her tone is professional, controlled. Cruz relaxes slightly, but the energy never fully resets. The remainder of the interview proceeds, but something fundamental has shifted. The ease is gone. The dynamic has changed. Viewers watching live might not have known exactly what they were witnessing, but they felt it. A boundary had been crossed. Not through aggression, but through persistence. Not through accusation, but through exposure. And as the cameras continued rolling, one thing was already clear. This moment would not fade when the episode ended. If you want to understand what happened next, how the room reacted, how the media responded, and how this single exchange reshaped everything that followed, stay with American Narrative. The moment passes, but the tension doesn't disappear. As Oprah gently steers the conversation forward, the studio atmosphere feels altered, quieter, more contained. The audience responds when prompted, but the applause lacks its earlier enthusiasm. Laughter, when it appears, is brief and cautious. The collective energy in the room has shifted from celebration to observation. Tom Cruise settles back into his seat, his posture loosening just slightly. His smile returns, but it no longer carries the same ease. The intensity that defined the exchange lingers, hanging in the space between questions and answers. He continues to engage, continues to speak, but the rhythm is different now, more controlled, more guarded. Oprah, ever the professional, recalibrates. She doesn't dwell on the tension. She doesn't attempt to resolve it on air. Instead, she does what experienced live hosts do when a conversation reaches a volatile edge. She widens the frame. She asks about projects, about future plans, about craft. The questions are neutral, grounding, designed to restore balance without erasing what just occurred. But restoration is partial at best. The audience remains attentive, but their role has changed. They're no longer passive participants in a feel-good interview. They're witnesses, watching closely, interpreting tone, posture, pauses. Cruise answers the new questions competently. He's articulate, engaged, professional. Yet the earlier ease, the sense of shared momentum, is gone. Each response feels measured, as though both sides are now aware of how fragile the space has become. Oprah's body language reflects this awareness. She maintains eye contact, nods affirmatively, but there's a subtle formality now. The warmth hasn't vanished, but it's tempered by caution. She's managing the room, the guest, and the audience simultaneously. This is the invisible labor of live television. Behind the cameras, producers can do nothing but watch. There's no undoing what's already aired. No editing around it. The exchange exists exactly as it happened, preserved in real time. As the segment nears its end, Oprah thanks Cruise for joining her. The closing is polite, respectful, even gracious. The audience applauds. Cruise stands, waves, and exits the stage. On the surface, the interview concludes like thousands of others. But the moment doesn't end there. In the studio, conversations begin immediately. Audience members exchange glances, lean toward one another, whisper impressions. Some are energized, others confused, a few visibly uncomfortable. Everyone, however, knows they've seen something unexpected. Oprah remains composed as the show moves on, but those close to her later noted the shift. The way she tightened her questions afterward, the way she maintained firmer boundaries for the rest of the broadcast. For a host so adept at emotional openness, the exchange required recalibration in real time. For Cruise, the impact is more complex. Backstage, he thanks the crew. He's courteous, professional, exactly as expected. But the controlled environment he typically commanded has been breached, not dramatically, but unmistakably. A live audience has seen him challenged without deference, and his response to that challenge has been recorded without filters. Within hours, the clip begins circulating. Viewers replay the exchange, not for sensationalism, but for clarity. They watch his posture, rewind the pauses, study Oprah's tone. The internet, still in an earlier phase of viral culture, begins doing what it does best, analyzing moments frame by frame. Media outlets pick up on it quickly. Headlines don't scream scandal. They ask questions. They note the tension. They describe the exchange as awkward, uncomfortable, revealing. Pundits debate whether Oprah crossed the line, or whether Cruise did. Importantly, there's no consensus. Some viewers admire Cruise's conviction. Others are unsettled by it. Some praise Oprah for pressing thoughtfully. Others wish she'd redirected sooner. The lack of a clear narrative only amplifies the moment's significance. Because ambiguity invites interpretation. Talk shows discuss it. Radio hosts debate it. Late-night comedians reference it carefully, aware that the material isn't punchline ready. This isn't slapstick or spectacle. It's something quieter, more complicated. A moment where certainty met resistance and didn't know how to adapt. For Cruise's public image, the shift is immediate. Not catastrophic, but noticeable. Interviews that follow are framed differently. Questions about his beliefs become more pointed. His answers are scrutinized more closely. The protective layer that once surrounded him the assumption of charm, control, and distance has thinned. And Oprah's role in that shift is scrutinized as well. She's praised by some for maintaining composure under pressure, criticized by others for allowing the exchange to escalate. But even her critics acknowledge one thing: she didn't manufacture the moment. She didn't provoke for ratings. She followed the conversation where it led. That distinction matters, because what unfolded wasn't a takedown. It wasn't an ambush. It was a collision of styles, certainty versus inquiry, played out in front of millions. In the immediate aftermath, no one involved issue statements. There's nothing to apologize for, nothing to correct. The interview stands as it aired. And that's what gives it weight. It becomes a reference point. A before and after line in Cruz's career. A case study in how live television can expose dynamics that rehearsed appearances conceal. The studio lights dim. The episode ends. But the moment continues, living on in reruns, clips, and collective memory. What began as a routine talk show appearance has quietly reshaped a narrative. And in the days, months, and years that follow, the impact of that single exchange only grows more visible. With time, the interview stops being just an interview. It becomes a reference point. In the months that follow, Tom Cruise's public image undergoes a subtle but undeniable shift. Not a collapse. Not a scandal-driven fall. Something quieter, and in many ways more lasting. The certainty he displayed on Oprah's couch becomes a lens through which future appearances are viewed. Interviews are no longer received at face value. They're examined. When Cruise speaks, people listen differently. Media outlets revisit the clip not to sensationalize it, but to contextualize what comes next. Each new interview, each public statement, is measured against that moment of live television where control wavered just enough for audiences to notice. Critics begin using words like intense more often than charming. Admirers emphasize his conviction rather than his charisma. Neutral observers focus on his relationship with the press, how interviews seem more guarded, more deliberate. The shift isn't imposed from outside. It's organic. Because once an audience sees a public figure challenged in real time and sees how they respond, it changes the relationship. The mystery narrows. The distance closes. For Cruise, this period coincides with a recalibration. His public appearances become more controlled again. Topics are redirected. Boundaries are reinforced. He remains one of the most successful actors in the world, but the sense of invulnerability that once defined him never fully returns. The Oprah interview becomes a line of demarcation. Before it, Cruise is seen largely as a master of image management. After it, he is viewed as someone whose certainty can provoke resistance when placed under calm scrutiny. Importantly, this isn't framed as failure. Many viewers respect what they see as authenticity. Others feel discomfort. What unites both reactions is engagement. The interview forces people to think, to question how belief, power, and celebrity intersect on live television. And Oprah's role in this moment solidifies her reputation in a different way. She had already been known as a compassionate interviewer, but this exchange adds another dimension to her legacy. It demonstrates her willingness to stay present in discomfort without resorting to spectacle. She doesn't escalate. She doesn't retreat. She listens and asks again. Media scholars later point to the interview as an example of soft confrontation. A reminder that challenging questions don't need to be hostile to be effective. That silence can be as powerful as argument. In the broader culture, the moment becomes shorthand. Clips resurface whenever discussions arise about celebrities losing control on live TV, about the risks of unscripted appearances, about the thin line between confidence and rigidity. Unlike explosive confrontations that burn bright and fade quickly, this one endures because it resists easy categorization. There's no villain, no clear winner, just two people navigating a narrowing space, watched by millions. That's why it still matters today. In an era of heavily managed media appearances, the interview stands as a reminder of what live television can still do. It can reveal, not through aggression, but through persistence. Not through shock, but through focus. It also highlights the power of the question. Not the loud question, Not the accusatory one, but the calm follow-up that refuses to move on too quickly. The kind that exposes certainty by asking it to explain itself. For viewers, the moment becomes educational. It shows how authority reacts when gently challenged, how control manifests under pressure, how belief sounds when it's asked to slow down. For celebrities, it becomes cautionary. Live television doesn't just amplify what you say, it amplifies how you say it. Your posture, your pauses, your willingness or refusal to engage with uncertainty. Years later, Tom Cruise continues to command attention, box office success, and respect within the industry. His career survives and thrives. But the Oprah interview remains part of his story because it captures something rare, a moment when narrative control briefly loosened. And once an audience sees that, it doesn't forget. That's why this interview is still replayed, still discussed, still analyzed. Not because it was explosive, but because it was revealing. If you value stories that look beyond headlines and examine the moments that quietly reshape public perception, subscribe to American Narrative. Like this video, share your perspective in the comments, and pass it along to someone who remembers watching this moment live. Because sometimes, the most powerful confrontations don't look like confrontations at all.